I told a woman that her son is welcome in my house, but she is not because of her criminal record. My husband and I have a 5-year-old son who started kindergarten last fall. He has met a boy named Sam who has decided that he is his best friend. My son has had many playdates in the past because we have made a great effort to socialize him from an early age. He has been asking if his friend Sam can come over to play. Of course, no problem. I wrote a note with my name and number for Sam to give to his mother. I received a friend request on Facebook from Sam's mother, who seems to be a junkie. I work in the healthcare sector and I recognize the sores on her face from scratching. It's quite obvious from her Facebook that she is using some kind of drug and may have mental health issues. Out of curiosity, I looked up her name in our county jail records, and yes, she has a long history. Drug possession, fraud, prostitution, theft, assault, obstruction of justice. Not good. Anyway, I didn't want the person that is his mother to get in the way of our kids playing together. But there was no way I was going to let my son go to her house to play, even though she offered. I played it off by saying that I'm overprotective and that he is my only child so as not to offend her. She laughed and said that if I had more kids, I would learn to be less overprotective. She has 5 kids, but agreed to a playdate at my house. The park was also an option, but she said my house was fine. The weather is very cold here now, so indoors is better than the park. Sunday came and I let the boy in. I mentioned that she could come back in a few hours to pick him up whenever she wanted, and I would make sure to feed both of them. I asked if he had any food allergies, and she said no, but she insisted on staying. I tried to make up a silly excuse, saying that I had a headache and that I would watch the kids diligently, but I wasn't in the mood to hang out. She insisted that it would be great for us to get to know each other. Since the kids were already out of earshot in the playroom, I stepped outside and quietly told her that I had looked up her criminal record and that I simply didn't feel comfortable having someone in my house with theft charges and an obvious drug problem. I told her that if this was an issue, we could just meet at the park from then on, but the kids got along well, so I hoped it wouldn't be a problem. I admit that maybe I was a bit harsh and too direct. She yelled at me and said I thought I was better than her, which maybe I am, and that I don't know anything. She left furious, with her son still inside the house. I checked on the kids to make sure they hadn't heard anything. When she returned, she just honked the horn and refused to come to the door. My husband thinks I was an asshole. He has always been very kind and gentle. He thinks I should have just watched her like a hawk. I told him that I don't want to forcibly expose myself to that kind of person and that I shouldn't have to be on guard in case some junkie steals our stuff. From that day on, the situation got a little strange. My son kept mentioning Sam, but I noticed he seemed confused about why his friend couldn't come over to play anymore. I didn't want him to feel guilty or get involved in the situation, so I told him that Sam could come to the park when it got warmer. But then, I started noticing strange things. One day, when I got home from work, I found a plastic bag in our backyard with several small objects, broken toys, a burnt spoon, and a note with a handwritten address. I didn't recognize the address, but I got a chill when I saw it. What did all of this mean? I mentioned it to my husband, who insisted I shouldn't worry too much, but I had a bad feeling. The next day, when I went to pick up my son from kindergarten, I noticed that Sam's mother was watching me from a distance, smoking a cigarette. When our eyes met, she smiled in a way that made me deeply uncomfortable. That night, as I was putting my son to bed, he whispered something that made my heart stop for a moment. "Mommy, Sam said his mom wants to come to our house again. He says she needs a place to sleep." I didn't know what to say. My son's comment left me frozen. I didn't want to alarm him, but I knew I had to act cautiously. I made sure to smile and give him a kiss on the forehead before turning off his bedroom light. However, my mind was filled with unsettling thoughts. Why did Sam's mother want to come to our house? What was she really looking for? The next morning, I decided to talk to my son's teacher. I wanted to be subtle, so I simply mentioned that I wanted to know more about Sam and his situation. The teacher was a bit reserved, but she told me that Sam sometimes arrived with dirty clothes and seemed tired. She couldn't tell me much more, but she confirmed my suspicions. Something was wrong in that house. When I left the school, I noticed a car parked a block away. It didn't seem out of place, but there was something about it that unsettled me. It felt like someone was watching me. I walked quickly to my car and drove away, checking my rearview mirror constantly. No one was following me, but the feeling of unease didn't go away. That afternoon, when my son came back from kindergarten, I noticed he was quieter than usual. I asked if something had happened at school, and after hesitating for a moment, he said, "Sam was sad today." He said his mom was crying because someone was mean to her. I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew he was probably talking about me. I tried to comfort him, telling him that sometimes adults have problems that make them feel sad, but that it wasn't his or Sam's fault. My son seemed reassured, but I couldn't stop thinking about the situation. That night, I decided to talk to my husband. I told him what our son had said and shared my concerns. As always, he tried to see the positive side. "Maybe she's trying to turn her life around," he suggested. "We don't know what she's going through." But I couldn't share his optimism. Something told me that Sam's mother was a danger, and now it seemed like she was looking for a way to get close to us again. A few days passed without incident. I relaxed a little, thinking that maybe I was overreacting. But one night, while taking out the trash, I noticed a shadow in the alley beside my house. It moved quickly when it saw me, as if it didn't want to be discovered. I froze for a moment before rushing inside and locking the door. My heart pounded. I looked out the window, trying to see if someone was still there. I saw nothing, but I felt like someone was watching us. I decided that was enough. The next morning, I called the police and told them that someone had been lurking around my house. I couldn't prove it was Sam's mother, but something inside me told me she had something to do with it. The officer took note of my report and promised they would patrol the area more frequently. That afternoon, when I went to pick up my son, Sam's mother was there. She approached me with a tense smile. "Hi," she said with fake enthusiasm. "I've been wanting to talk to you." I took a deep breath and prepared myself for whatever she was about to say. Sam's mother approached with a smile that didn't seem entirely sincere. I stood still, trying to assess her intentions while she intertwined her fingers as if she were nervous. "I've been wanting to talk to you," she repeated, staring at me. "Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot, but I know our kids get along well, and I don't want problems between adults to affect them." I didn't respond immediately. There was something in her tone, in the way her eyes kept darting around, that made me uneasy. Finally, I said in a controlled voice, "That's the most important thing, that the kids are okay." She nodded quickly, as if she had expected a more hostile reaction. "Exactly. And well, I've been going through tough times, but I'm trying to get better. That's why I wanted to ask you for a favor." I knew this was coming. I mentally prepared myself for what was next. "Depends on the favor," I replied. She sighed and lowered her voice. "I just need a place to stay for a few days. Nothing complicated, just until I find something stable." I couldn't believe it. This conversation was supposed to be about our kids, but now she was asking me for shelter in my home. "I'm sorry, but I can't do that," I said firmly. Her expression changed in an instant. Her smile disappeared, replaced by a look full of resentment. "I knew you'd say that," she muttered, and then, in a barely audible voice, added, "But we'll see." I didn't wait to hear more. I took my son's hand, and we walked straight to the car. As we drove away, I saw her in the rearview mirror, still standing there, with an expression that sent chills down my spine. That night, my husband and I talked about what had happened. "This is going too far," I told him. "I don't want that woman coming near us anymore." He nodded with concern. "Maybe we should report her if she keeps insisting," he suggested. "I don't want you to feel like we're in danger." A couple of days passed without incident. I thought that maybe, just maybe, Sam's mother had gotten the message. But then, one morning, I found a note under the door. It wasn't signed, but I knew perfectly well who it was from. Mothers should help each other. I threw it away immediately, but fear started growing inside me. What if she didn't give up? What if she wouldn't take no for an answer? I decided to reinforce our home's security. I asked my husband to install a surveillance camera at the entrance, and we strengthened the locks. I didn't know how far Sam's mother's desperation would go, but I wasn't willing to find out the hard way. That night, something woke me up, a faint sound, a rustling against the living room window. My heart started pounding. I carefully slid out of bed, trying not to wake my husband, and slowly walked toward the living room. I peeked out the window, and my blood ran cold. There she was, standing on the sidewalk, staring directly at the house. She wasn't doing anything, just watching, as if she were waiting for something. I stepped back and grabbed my phone, but when I looked out the window again, she was gone. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, we checked the footage from the camera. There she was, standing still, watching our house for several minutes. Then, without warning, she simply walked away, disappearing into the darkness. This time, there was no doubt. I needed to do something before the situation got out of control. After watching the security camera footage, I knew the situation had crossed a line. This wasn't just a coincidence, nor even a desperate insistence. Sam's mother was stalking us. My husband and I looked at each other in silence, both having the same thought. This couldn't continue. The next morning, I decided to take action. I went straight to the police station and showed them the recording. The officer who assisted me frowned as he reviewed the frozen image of the woman standing outside my house in the middle of the night. "We understand your concern, Mom," he said in a professional tone, "but she hasn't attempted to enter your property or committed any direct crime. We can patrol the area, but without a restraining order or evidence that she's threatening you, there's not much else we can do." I felt frustrated, but I understood the bureaucracy. Still, I filed a harassment report to make sure there was an official record of the situation. I returned home feeling uneasy. My husband tried to reassure me, saying that maybe the police presence would scare her away and make her stop. But something inside me told me this wouldn't end so easily. That afternoon, while picking up my son from kindergarten, I saw Sam sitting alone in the playground. He wasn't with the other kids. He looked dejected, and when he saw me, he ran toward me. "My mom says we can't talk to you," he whispered, looking around. "But I still want to." My heart clenched. I crouched down to his level. "Sam, are you okay? Does your mom treat you well at home?" The boy hesitated for a moment before shrugging. "Sometimes she's sad. Sometimes she yells. But it's because she has a lot on her mind." I wanted to hug him, but I knew I couldn't. I couldn't get more involved than I already was. When I got home with my son, I found something taped to the front door. A yellow envelope. When I opened it, I saw a photo of my house taken from the street with a single phrase written on the back, "You can't ignore me forever." My blood ran cold. I rushed inside, locked all the doors, and called the police again. This time, they sent a patrol car that arrived in less than 10 minutes. They took the photo as evidence and promised to investigate. Still, there wasn't much they could do other than recommend that I be careful. That night, my husband and I seriously discussed the possibility of moving. I couldn't allow this woman to put our family in danger, but it wasn't easy. Our home was where our son felt safe, where we had built our life. I didn't want her to take that away from us. Despite everything, the following nights were quiet. Nothing strange happened, and I started to think that maybe the police presence had worked. Until one early morning, a sound woke me up. A dull thud against the living room window. My heart raced as I slowly got out of bed. My husband woke up too, and in silence, we moved toward the living room. Another thud, this time louder. We looked at each other. My husband grabbed a baseball bat while I held my phone, ready to call the police. We approached the window and slightly pulled back the curtain. Outside, in the darkness, we saw a hunched figure. The streetlight barely illuminated her face, but there was no doubt who it was. Sam's mother stood there, her eyes wide and a twisted smile on her face. Her hair was matted, her clothes dirty. She raised a hand and pressed it against the glass, leaving a greasy mark. My husband and I froze. And then, suddenly, she whispered something. We couldn't hear her, but I could see her lips moving. "Let me in." My thumb pressed the dial button to call the police as she remained there, staring at us, unmoving. The phone rang once, twice, and then the woman tilted her head as if she had just realized what we were doing. Suddenly, she took a few steps back and ran toward the street, disappearing into the night. By the time the police arrived, there was no trace of her. But I knew this wasn't over. I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. Every sound in the house put me on high alert. Every shadow cast by the streetlight made me imagine the worst. My husband tried to calm me, assuring me that the police were aware and would be patrolling near our house. But I knew that wouldn't be enough. Sam's mother wouldn't stop. The next morning, my son came downstairs for breakfast with an innocent smile on his face, completely unaware of everything that was happening. I wondered how much longer I could keep him that way, protected from reality. I forced myself to act normal while preparing his breakfast, but my mind kept racing, trying to figure out ways to keep him safe. When I dropped him off at kindergarten, I felt a mix of relief and guilt. I knew he would be safe while he was there, but the thought that Sam's mother could show up at any moment haunted me. I didn't want my son to see her darker side. I decided to grab a coffee at a nearby cafe before heading home. I needed to clear my head, even if just for a moment. But as soon as I stepped inside and sat at a table by the window, my stomach sank. At a table across the cafe, there she was, Sam's mother. Her hair was even more disheveled than the last time I saw her. Her pale skin was marked with bruises and sores. Her dark eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I felt like they were piercing through me. She smiled in a strange way and tilted her head, as if she were analyzing me. My body tensed. I thought about getting up and running out, but I knew that if I did, I would only give her more power over me. So I stayed put, pretending to be indifferent as I took a sip of my coffee. She slowly stood up and walked toward my table. I forced myself to stay firm as she leaned in slightly and whispered, "Good morning. What a coincidence running into each other here." I didn't respond. Her fingers drummed impatiently on the table. "You know, I think there was a misunderstanding the last time we talked," she continued. "I just want what's best for my son, just like you want for yours." "I have nothing to say to you," I replied firmly. She let out a dry laugh. "You're a tough one, but don't worry, I'll find a way to make you understand." Her veiled threat made my skin crawl. Before I could say anything else, she straightened up and walked out of the cafe. I stayed there, feeling like the air had suddenly grown heavier. When I got home, I double-checked the locks and security cameras. My husband was also uneasy, and we began seriously discussing the possibility of moving before something worse happened. That night, insomnia trapped me again. I got up to check the house and looked out the window. Everything seemed quiet. But just as I was about to go back to bed, I noticed something on the sidewalk. A small object. I cautiously stepped outside and approached it to see what it was. My heart stopped when I realized what I was looking at. My son's favorite stuffed animal, his brown teddy bear, the one he always took to bed. I picked it up with trembling hands and looked around. The street was empty, but I knew she had been here. Sam's mother had been close enough to take something from my son. I rushed back inside and locked all the doors. My husband woke up when he saw how shaken I was. I showed him the teddy bear, and his expression hardened. "This is too much. Tomorrow, we're talking to a lawyer about a restraining order." I nodded, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't be enough. Something told me this was just the beginning. Finding my son's stuffed animal on the sidewalk was the final straw. There was no doubt Sam's mother had been far too close, and with that, she had crossed a dangerous line. That night, I didn't sleep. My husband and I decided we couldn't wait any longer. The next morning, we went straight to the police station. This time, we brought all the evidence. The security camera footage, the photos she left on our door, and now the stuffed animal. The officer who assisted us took the report much more seriously than before. "This is full-blown harassment now," he said sternly. "We'll process the restraining order and also send a patrol to your house regularly. If you see her nearby, call us immediately." We left the station with a mix of relief and fear. Having police support was a first step, but we knew Sam's mother wouldn't give up so easily. That afternoon, I picked up my son from kindergarten as usual. Thankfully, Sam wasn't there. I wondered if his mother had kept him home. I didn't relax. I knew it was only a matter of time before she tried something else. I didn't have to wait long. That night, the sound of shattering glass jolted me awake. My husband and I jumped out of bed, my heart pounding wildly. We ran to the living room and saw what we feared. The window had been broken with a rock. But the worst part wasn't the glass on the floor. The worst part was the figure standing in the entryway, the staggering silhouette of Sam's mother who had managed to enter our house. "Get out of here now," my husband shouted, stepping between her and our son's bedroom. But she didn't move. Her gaze was unfocused, her pale face covered in fresh scratch marks. Her eyes shone with a mixture of fury and desperation. "It's not fair," she mumbled. "You have everything. You have a happy son, a beautiful home. I just wanted you to help me." Her voice broke, but within a second, the anger returned. She took a step forward. My husband gripped the baseball bat we had left by the door. "Don't take another step," he warned firmly. "The police are on their way." The distant sound of sirens confirmed his threat. The woman turned her head, and her expression changed again, this time to panic. For a second, she hesitated, but then she bolted toward the back door, trying to escape. The patrol arrived just in time. The officers rushed in, subduing her before she could flee. She screamed, she resisted, but within seconds, she was handcuffed on the floor. Her eyes met mine one last time before they took her away. "You took everything from me," she whispered. I didn't respond. I just watched as she disappeared into the patrol car, a shiver running down my spine. The following days were difficult. Our son didn't understand why he couldn't see Sam anymore, but we explained, in terms he could understand, that his mom had done something bad and needed help. Fortunately, he seemed to accept the explanation without asking too many questions. We later received news that Sam's mother would be prosecuted for trespassing, harassment, and property damage. With her record, she would likely spend time in prison or be forced into rehabilitation. I didn't feel relieved, just deeply sad for Sam. I hoped that somehow he would find the stability he deserved. Eventually, my husband and I decided it was best to start fresh somewhere else. I didn't want to live with the constant fear that she might return one day. So we sold the house and moved to a new city where we could begin again. With time, the feeling of danger faded. My son grew up without memories of Sam or his mother, and though I sometimes wondered what had become of him, I decided that the best thing I could do was move on and leave the past behind. The nightmare was finally over.